Now we're live, and I'm gonna make you the host, so please make me the co-host after that, okay?
Okay, will do. And there you go. You should
Yep,
be co-host.
perfect.
All right.
Because I usually mute people, especially those people who have a noisy background.
Yes.
I usually mute them.
Yep. Really appreciate that. And appreciate when you tell me when people have questions or comments because they put some really good comments in there, not just questions, but comments too. And that's nice to know what they're saying. I like that they participate. So
Right, right. Oh, should I read them to you, including the
yeah, that'd be
comments?
fine. Just periodically, you can just stop and say, "Hey, I have a few comments in the chat you might be interested in." So
Oh, okay.
yeah, that'd be fine. You can just say, "Excuse me," and that's fine with me.
All right, good, good. Okay, I'm gonna
Look
do
for
that.
a natural.
I'll be moderating the chat. So.
Nice. You can be you. I'll introduce you, and you can be part of the conversation. It's more fun for you too.
Sure, sure, no problem.
Keeps you awake this late or early in the morning, as the case may be.
Right, right. But to be honest, I don't prepare food. I don't cook. Yeah, I just like eating. So my wife does all the cooking and preparing.
Well, then you'll have to get some of the recipes and she can prepare some of the recipes. That would be fun.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have the recording of this, so we'll probably show her.
Okay, right.
Okay, so people are coming in, and I'll just be in the background. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Hey, Rayanne. Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Hey, Michael. Hello. There's Michael. And I see Caroline and Nancy. Hey, Nancy. Mary Beth, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, there's Lorraine. Hello. And Karen. Hey, what Nelda's back for more, and Joanne's back for more. There's Karen. Susie. Hi, Susie.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, thank you. Marilyn 54. Garnetta, thanks for coming back. Wow, we're three today, huh?
3 today. I gotta stop doing this.
I don't
It's
mind.
addicting. It's very addicting.
I
Yes,
don't mind
it is.
addiction. uh, hi, Deanna. Here comes Bev. Hi, Bev.
Hi.
Wow, so you all came to learn more about quinoa. That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, we're just going to get to the tip of the iceberg with quinoa. There is so much to share with that. I had a hard time, picking recipes, and I thought, well, I'm going to start simple. So I wanted to show you some diversity. But I think we'll be back for more with more recipes using quinoa because it is such a good grain in so many different ways, which is what we'll be are about to talk more about. And before I get ahead of myself, let me just ask if there's anyone who's brand new to get set up here right now. Anyone who's just joining Get Set Up for the very first time. Okay. How about, is there anyone who's just joining my class for the first time? Any classes of mine? Okay, Nancy, well, welcome. I'm glad to have you. I hope it will be the first of many. And Marilyn, 54, first time for you. Good, glad to have you here. And Rayanne, you too? Okay. Happy you're here. I'm so glad to see some new faces, and I'm really glad to see folks who are coming back. Like I said, some are here 2 and 3 times today, which is just wonderful. And I'm happy to see you all. So I'm going to go ahead. I know Marlene's just getting here. Eileen just checked in. Hello. Going to share
Hello.
screen. Okay. First time for you, Karen. Okay. Great. Welcome. Karen, is that the first time just with me or with Get Set Up?
With you.
Okay, so it sounds like most everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like most everyone has been to Get Set Up classes before. And that's important for me to know. So we welcome you back, and I'm just delighted to have some new folks here, along with those of you who are my people who keep coming back. It's great. So let me draw your attention to my presentation. We're doing a spotlight on quinoa today. And for those of you who have never met me before, my name is Deb Livingston, and I am your guide here on the East Coast. I live in York, Pennsylvania, and my background is in business, organizational development, training and development, adult and organizational development. That is a huge mouthful. That's what one of my master's degrees was in, and my other ones were in psychology. So I did a lot of training, a lot of leadership coaching, a lot of that business stuff. And now it's so much fun to translate that into doing work here at Get Set Up, which isn't really like work at all. It's more like fun, and I get to play around with recipes, share information about my garden and how I use those things in my recipes as well. So it's a lot of fun, and I think that I learn as much from you all as you might learn from me. And that is really what it's all about. So if you get a chance to join by camera, that would be fantastic. It's very energizing when I see all your faces on camera, and when you're unmuting yourself and asking questions, that's great. But I also understand if for whatever reason you can't come on camera, that's okay. No judgment here. Just know that I welcome your participation in whatever way you would like to give it. And we are recording this session. Just going to ask Phil to double check that we're recording, because I do sometimes pause the recording ahead of time when I come in early, so we don't have a lot of dead air. You can request that recording at help@getsetup.io. And I do want to take a brief pause to invite Phil on to say hello. He's our TA support. And we were just having a little chat before you all came about making sure that we get to see what you have in the chat box. Phil, you want to say hi? Hi, Phil. Phil might be busy in the background, but he's here to catch up with chats and to make sure that I don't miss anything. We are running this by live stream as well. So if you've been on the website and you see that little TV icon, lots of people use that when they can't get into a class. I learned last class that's how they use it. You can have it on in the background. Yeah, thank you for that, Mary Beth. I think you told me that. And so you can have it on in the background, but I much prefer when you're here live and in person. But I say hi to all of those who are out in live stream world and invite you to join in on these conversations. Get Set Up does not get paid to promote any specific products. I think you all know that by now. It would be nice if some things showed up on my back step, but that's not happening. So anyway, our agenda for today, we're going to talk about exactly what is quinoa. And I bet, well, raise your hand if you know anything about how quinoa is grown or harvested. Nancy, great. So we'll get your input on that as we move forward. I'd like to know a little more about what you know. And we'll also talk about the nutritional benefits. Why is it such a deal? And why are people flocking to incorporate quinoa into their diet? Then we're going to talk about cooking quinoa. So how many of you have struggled with having your quinoa turn out just the way you like it? Anybody try that and have any difficulty? Who cooks quinoa now? Just raise your hand or give me a heads up. Does it turn out perfect every time? Pretty much? No. What happens, Mary Beth?
It's just a variety. Sometimes it gets overcooked and starts sticking to the pan, and you really have to be careful with it. But it doesn't stop me.
Yeah, and to read what they say about cooking that on the stove, you'd think it was a piece of cake, and sometimes there are things that throw us off a little bit. Does anybody else have the same issue that Mary Beth has? Gets sticky or it starts to burn or you. Okay, Susie, you have your hand up. Want to weigh in?
I was just saying I cook it sometimes.
Okay, you cook it sometimes. Okay, so we're going to look at two ways of cooking it today. And one I really love because it is foolproof. So anything that you are hoping to learn today, if there was one thing about quinoa, what would it be?
Want to know how to use it as a protein source
Okay, okay.
in a plant-based diet.
You're on a plant-based diet. Okay. Very good, because it's a good point. It's an important protein source. Okay.
And don't they have different types of quinoa? Quinoa? Different colors or something?
Different colors, yes. As a matter of fact, there's red quinoa. There's pale, like white quinoa or yellow quinoa. There's black quinoa. So yes, there are different colors and nothing different in terms of nutritional value. They just look different depending upon the dish that you want to use them in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So let's talk about quinoa and how it's grown and harvested. Whoops. Hang on here a second. First of all, I want to give you a little background. Is quinoa a seed or a grain? Well, this I say nerd alert because I like to know this kind of thing, but quinoa itself is not exactly a grain because a grain is defined as something that's harvested. It's a grass typically. Now it does get the terms get used interchangeably, but theoretically, quinoa is a seed, not a grain. It's considered what is called a pseudo cereal because it's not like a wheat or a rye. It's more like an amaranth or another kind of related to other plants not in the grain or the grass family. But having said that, we cook it and eat it like a grain, but it is gluten-free. And 90% of it is grown in South America. So we've recently, I would say in the last half dozen years maybe, begun experimenting with it here in the United States and other countries as well, like Canada. It takes 90 to 120 days from sowing to harvest. And it is harvested by hand, mostly in South America. Here in the United States, we tend to sow it by machine or harvested by machine. So this is what I wanted to show you about the harvesting in South America. So I'm not going to play the music. You can watch and read along with the subtitles. They are harvesting what is called black quinoa. And in this case, this quinoa is a little shorter. And she's just saying the plants are a little old, but this variety is typically smaller. So black quinoa.
Is it a perennial or does it have to be planted every time?
It has to be planted. Well, no, these plants, they said, these plants are getting a little old. So good question. I think it is. I think in the United States, we harvest it and replant it, but I wonder if in South America, if that is the case. So we're going to look that up right now so we know that answer. I have to get down here and make my screen smaller. So let me take a quick look at that. Does anybody else know the answer to that? I should ask, does somebody raise their hand and said they knew a little more? Perennial. It does say that it is a perennial. So my sense of what I'm watching here is that it is, it can be a perennial, but this is how we do it in the United States.
For this Washington State farm,
That's a good section.
harvesting quinoa. After 5 decades growing everything from cabbage to wheat, Nash Huber recently finished harvesting the South American grain.
It's a beautiful crop.
With demand growing for quinoa, a small number of American farmers are testing out the crop.
We're in the early stages here, still learning. You know, this is, I kind of stepped off the end of the dock here with a little bit of a bite this year.
More than 90% of the quinoa supply comes from Peru and Bolivia. But Americans consume more than half the global production of quinoa, the edible seeds known for their nutritional value.
It's got all of the amino acids that human needs, so it's a complete protein, and that's really hard to find in grain crops.
16, 23, 27. It's also been a challenge finding the right way to grow it in the US. Washington State University researchers are testing varieties that can withstand heat, along with late summer rains without sprouting.
I think to have like large acreage, a lot of farmers throughout the U.S. growing quinoa, it'll take some new variety development that works for the different regions.
While quinoa has been a boon for the economies of Peru and Bolivia, generating $111 million in 2012, recent overproduction has caused prices to drop, straining farmers, especially small ones.
The lower quinoa prices has affected them because it takes a lot of money to cultivate quinoa, more than other crops.
Quinoa's diversity is part of the appeal for farmers like Huber.
I hope I break even. You know, if we break even, make a little money, that'll be good, because I've learned quite a few things here.
A learning experience that could help reshape the future of quinoa on U.S. soil. Tracy Brown, Associated Press.
Okay, so I see that there may be some comments in the chat. I'm just going to take a quick look there. Anything, Phil? It sounds like to me, I need to do a little more looking to see about this whole idea of being, whether it's a perennial or not. I suspect that it may be dependent upon the climate that it's grown in as well. So whether it's a tender perennial or whether it's one that can be regrown each year. So I'm interested now. Thanks for asking that question. Okay. Just looking in the chat here. Okay. So nutritional benefits. You heard the woman in the last video say that it is a complete protein. So our bodies don't make amino acids. They take in amino acids and convert them to other things. So the quinoa does have all 9 amino acids that our body needs. That's not quite the same. Beans aren't quite the same. So beans and rice is a complete protein together, but beans alone are not necessarily quite a complete protein. And you can see, I think, that there are other really high levels of nutrients in quinoa. Pretty good with respect to fiber. This is 1 cup. It's fairly low calories. 1 cup is 222 calories, 5 grams of fiber. Pretty high level of manganese, which is important for metabolism, and pretty high level of magnesium as well, and really just a pretty good nutritional profile. I'm going to just stop right here and see if you have any comments or questions about what we just saw or talked about here from a nutrition standpoint.
That's a lot of carbs. 39, is that?
Yeah, the good thing about it is, though, that it does have the fiber, and it is a slowly digested carb. So if you're going to eat carbs, this is the kind of carb to eat. And I'm not too sure that one would eat a whole cup of quinoa at a time. So consider that. You're usually eating it with something else. So cooking quinoa. Now, show me your hand if you cook quinoa, if you said you cook quinoa. I'm interested in hearing I'm going to ask Bev, what's your method for cooking quinoa?
I just boiled the water and then add it to the water and then have it on low for about 15 minutes. And it's usually done.
And so how does that compare with what you do, Mary Beth?
So I basically do the same thing, just put it on the stove for about 20 minutes. And that's my problem because I want to do other things while it's cooking and then I forget about it.
Yep, precisely. Alice, do you have something to add?
No, I wanted to ask a question about, you made a comparison with the nutrients of quinoa versus beans. You said something about beans, and I've just been considering eating more beans. So I wanted to know what you said about beans because I came in late.
Yeah, beans are great. They're a great nutritional powerhouse. Okay, so there's all good things about beans. They give you lots of vitamin B vitamins, lots of fiber. They are and lots of other nutrients. They are also, well, they are very high. Did I say fiber? They're high in a lot of things. Good protein. They do not have quite all of the amino acids that your body requires. So you add a little bit of rice in there, or you eat a little something else that does have the aminos, including adding some quinoa, and you get more complete protein. But
okay,
they're definitely a good source.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Does it have to be cooked on the stove top, or can you use like a rice cooker?
Yes, you can. Now, I don't have a rice cooker, so I wouldn't give the specific instructions for that, but you could certainly do that. And I had someone in the last class say that they have made it in their rice cooker.
Can you add a touch of olive oil when you cook this?
Sure, you can. Yep, you can cook it like a grain.
Or like couscous, for example?
Yes, you can cook it that way. And so I want to get into that right now, although I see there's a couple of other hands up, so I don't want to move past these questions yet. But Eileen, do you have your hand? Do you have a question?
A comment. I've only cooked it once, and maybe not the best way for most people, but I did it in the microwave, and it was the whole time. But it was really great.
It was great. You cut out while you were saying the most important part of whatever you said there. So could you just repeat?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? I only cooked it once, but it was in the microwave, and it was so delicious. I could have eaten the entire amount at one time with it being hot.
Wow, that's good. That's good praise for quinoa. Did you cook it with water or broth? Water?
Yes.
Okay, you were cutting out there. We didn't hear that.
I'm sorry, just water.
Just water. Okay. All right. Wow. It sounds like you did a really great, whatever you did was the right thing. So there are many ways, what we're learning, there are many ways to cook quinoa, and it doesn't have to be as fussy as we might think. Garnetta, did you have a question?
I was told that you're supposed to rinse it before you cook it. Is that the norm, or I'm just doing an extra step?
It sure is a norm. And sometimes your quinoa will say that it's been pre-rinsed, but oftentimes if it isn't labeled as such, you should rinse it. Here's why. Okay. Quinoa is covered with a natural substance called saponin, which is actually an ingredient that you might find in soap. And you know what it tastes like? It tastes soapy and bitter. And it is a natural protectant on the seed or the grain because birds don't like it then. So the plant has, isn't it smart? The plant has this protective coating. So when we are rinsing it, we're rinsing the saponin off. So I'm going to do that right now. And I'm going to say that if you haven't cooked quinoa before, this isn't really the best strainer to use. It's the only big one that I have, so I need to buy another one. And I would like to buy one that's got holes that are a little more like this. See the difference? This isn't as much, you can't really see the difference. So this one has larger holes. I realize it maybe doesn't.
We can see it fine.
Okay, I saw somebody nodding their head up there that maybe they couldn't see it. So I am going to pour this.
You might want to change your screen because we're looking at your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I always appreciate that. There we go. All right. So.
Hey, Deb, I have a couple of questions. I had to step away, so I apologize if you've answered this. Can you make it in an Instapot?
Yes.
Okay. And then I've heard you should soak the quinoa overnight.
I think you're okay really with rinsing the quinoa.
Okay.
So lots of grains though you do soak overnight, but this one is going to be rinsed and getting the saponins off of it. Now what I don't like about this is that the grains do fall through. So I missed some of them and I'm going to just rinse over the bowl here in my sink. About 30 seconds under the water. And yeah, I've lost a few grains, but nothing terrible. And then what I'm going to do right now is demonstrate one of the ways in which you would cook quinoa. And that is actually this method number 2 that I'm going to send you one of two methods. I'm going to send you method number 1, which really has you using the amount of liquid that would equal twice the amount of quinoa. So if you use a cup of quinoa, you're cooking a cup of quinoa, you're going to use 2 cups of water. And the way in which you do this is you cook the quinoa in the water until everything gets absorbed. And once everything is absorbed, you set your quinoa off the stove and let the lid on for 10 minutes to steam. And that's what allows it to get fluffy. Because I've had times when I tried cooking it, didn't look up the recipe, sort of forgot what I was doing about it, what I needed to do differently from rice. And my quinoa would get sticky. Did you ever have that happen where it got like sticky? So leaving it off the heat with the lid on for 10 minutes helps it to become fluffy. And after the 10 minutes, you get your fork in there and you just fluff it up. Nancy, how does that, is that what you do? Anything you would add to that? Nothing? Okay, so you can add a little salt too to the water when you're doing this. Takes about 15 to 20 minutes for it to cook. And then you set it off for another 10. Okay. Now the second method that I'm going to demonstrate to you is the one that I really like a lot. I guess the first method would be one if you wanted to use some chicken broth or a broth and you wanted it to absorb those flavors. You can use that with the second method as well, but you might be throwing away more chicken broth than you would want to. But the second method is just making it like you would pasta. So what do you do with pasta? How do you cook pasta? Anybody?
Boil a lot of water, put some salt in it, throw in the pasta and wait for it to be done.
That's it. And that's all you have to do with your quinoa. So Mary Beth, I do the same thing as you. I walk away and then I mess things up. So I don't really have a problem when I put my quinoa on like I do pasta. Now, I mean, I don't think you can boil it to death, but it's also not quite as sensitive as pasta would be if you left it on too long. So you would just really fill your pot up with water. It says at least a minimum of 8 cups of water to a cup of dry quinoa, and bring this to a boil. So I'm going to let that work its magic for now, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So these are some recipes. Checking my time here. This is one of my all-time favorite quinoa recipes. It's a salad recipe, and I think you might enjoy it, especially for this time of year in the summer. I'm going to share my screen now so I can show you this one. Okay, so you should see a quinoa asparagus salad page. Is that what you see? It says feasting at home at the top. See that? Okay. And these are pea shoots that someone put to garnish this recipe. Unless you've access to fresh pea shoots, it's an extra thing that you can add, but it's not really a necessary part of the recipe.
Deb, we're not seeing the recipe. We're seeing
Yeah, we're seeing how to grow it.
Oh, okay. Try this again. Now can you see?
Yes.
At the top? Beautiful. All right. So let's just jump to the recipe here now that you've seen the picture. And this calls for a cup of quinoa. And this cooks the quinoa in the way in which we talked about in method number 1. It uses 1.5 cups of water. I would just cook the quinoa whatever way you're comfortable cooking it. I make this just doing the pasta boil method. And then you will use in this recipe a bunch of asparagus that you chop into 1-inch pieces, and 2 cups of peas. They can be fresh peas that you have out of your garden. They could even be edamame. You can substitute all kinds of other greens or peas, including those snow peas. It's too early in my garden for peas to be up, so I just had frozen peas. I used a couple of cups of those and let them thaw, ran a little warm water over them, and then sliced 3 scallions. I cut up 1/2 cup of fresh dill. That's a lot of dill, but it really takes a lot of dill well in this recipe.
A lot of folks.
And we're also using parsley in this recipe and some slivered almonds that you toast. Now, if you're going to have a lot of this salad, and it does make a fair amount, it makes enough for, let's see, where does it say? 4 to 6 servings. If you think you're going to have a lot of leftover, it holds really nicely for a few days. I would just add the almonds in, though, as you're eating it, serving it fresh, because they get in there and then they lose their crispness a little bit. So it's kind of nice to scatter them in or add them in as you're serving it. And then the dressing is olive oil, some lemon, a lemon zest, and a little salt and pepper. Very simple dressing, and very easy to make. The only thing you do after you make the quinoa is blanch the peas and the asparagus for a little bit until they're bright green, and then you run them under cold water and put the cooled quinoa and the veggies in the bowl along with the scallions and the dill and the almonds. Give it a toss and then add the dressing. You don't even have to mix that dressing up separately. You can just put it all in together if you like. Then just adjust seasonings and you're good to go. So this one I think tastes really good with a side of feta cheese on it. So that would be something if you wanted to add more saltiness, more punch to it, you can add some feta cheese. Now I'm going to come back to these, but I want to get something else started here. I want to show you how to make quinoa cookies, because this uses quinoa flour. Have you ever seen quinoa flour in the store? So you can get it already made, or you can make your own quinoa flour by grinding your quinoa raw in a food processor. So we are going to use this and mix up a batch of quinoa cookies. This is calling for, I'm going to stop my share now so you can see what I'm doing.
You've got it.
I stopped it, okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, I'm looking for my recipe. Thanks. So now what I'm going to do is put a cup of quinoa flour in my bowl. These are so easy to make, and it doesn't make a huge batch, so you can try these. And I picked these because they are this cookie. There are a lot of quinoa flour cookies out there that mix a lot of other ingredients in addition to quinoa flour, other flour type ingredients. But I thought that it might be useful for you to try a quinoa cookie recipe that just has the quinoa in it, because you might find it that then you can get a real taste for what the quinoa is like. And these are gluten-free, completely gluten-free, because quinoa is a gluten-free substance. So it's 1 cup of quinoa flour. It's a ½ teaspoon of baking powder, baking soda. ½ teaspoon of baking soda. I have a lot of white powder ingredients in mason jars here. I have to double check and make sure I'm using the right white powder. Okay, so ½ teaspoon. And then 1/8 teaspoon of salt. You guys have these little, have you ever used these tiny little measuring spoons? Do you ever see these? They're really nice, but they're not measured. They don't have on them what they are in terms of if they're 1/8 teaspoon or whatever. They're on here as a smidgen, a drop, a tad, a dash, and a pinch. So I have this little handy cheat sheet that I had to write down after I looked it up, and I found that a dash is 1/8 teaspoon. So I have to always go back and check that out. Why they don't have that on these spoons, I'll never know. So I'm going to put a little dash of salt in here. I use Himalayan pink salt. And I'm going to mix this around. And then it calls for 1/3 cup of melted coconut oil. So I use this. This is what I had on hand. Actually, I've been looking for a decent priced unrefined coconut oil, which will have a coconut flavor. This is refined. It doesn't have coconut flavor. I like having coconut flavor in my baked goods. So my water is boiling now for my quinoa. And I'm just going to pour the quinoa into my pan.
So Deb, you said that the coconut, the unrefined, is not as sweet. Is that what you said?
Well, no, the unrefined coconut oil tastes like coconut.
Okay.
The refined coconut oil doesn't taste like coconut.
Okay.
So I like to have both on hand because sometimes it's nice to have a coconut flavor. Like in my brownies, I like it in my brownies, my avocado brownies that I teach in the healthy desserts class. So did I say a third of a cup of melted coconut oil? So we're going to add that.
Looks like more than a third of a cup, but okay.
It was a third, and it is an egg.
You say that's 1 cup flour?
Yes. And then we're going to add it's a half of a cup of coconut sugar or brown sugar. I'm adding in mine because I like less sugar. I'm doing a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of better than sugar, which is a sugar replacement that has erythritol and stevia. That's just me because I have to eat these cookies and I don't prefer to have all the sugar, but it's brown sugar if you choose to just use sugar overall. And I might even go a little bit less because my taste buds are sort of need less sugar these days. And then I'm going to include in there a 1/2 cup of semi-sweet or bittersweet chocolate chips. These are the really teeny ones, kind of like them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, so these make not a lot of cookies, not batches, dozens and dozens of cookies. And they take about 10 minutes to bake. So I'm going to shape these and put them on my baking sheet that I have covered with a silicone mat. Who uses these? Anybody use these? Silicone mats. They are really nice to use. The alternative is also to use parchment paper or nothing at all. You don't need to use a covering here, but I don't think so anyway. Let me double check my recipe. No, you should bake it on parchment paper or on one of these. So I wanted to double check. So in case you ever get these, they have them at Costco and they have them in 2 different sizes, a small one and then this size. And you might be able to see that there's some staining on here. It's because I roasted tomatoes on them. I won't do that again. I like to keep them sort of clean. And these are not going to spread out. So what I am told to do in the instruction is just roll it in a ball and lay it out flat on the pan and smash it down a little bit.
I'm wondering, can you substitute peanut butter versus chocolate chip?
Why not? Sure. Yep, that would be fine. And I have a feeling you were right. Maybe I didn't eyeball that well enough with the oil. This feels a little wetter than what I had made before. So I am going to add a little flour. Who told me that? Who said that? Who had an eagle eye on the flour? Who was that? Or not on the flour, on the oil. Who told me that looked a little more than a 1/3 of a cup? So I think you might be right. So I'm just making my dough a little less wet. We'll see how they turn out then, if there's a difference.
Have you ever tried them with like walnuts or something?
I have not. You know, I've only made these. This will be the 2nd time I made them. So I made them once and I liked them and I thought they should make the class. So they would, I think anything that you would put in a regular cookie, you could put into these.
Is the quinoa that's cooking like pasta going to boil over?
It is not, it's doing fine. It's
Do
doing
you
fine.
stir it?
No, I did not stir it. Do I need to stir it?
I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, no, you don't need to stir it. I will check it though to see whether we're at a place where we should be taking it out. Multitasking here. And incidentally, I'm reminded that one of the things you can do when you're doing cookies like this, when they stick to your fingers, is keep a little flour or a little container of flour, a little container of water, dip your fingers in to keep it from sticking. So let's see.
Does your flour have a cookie recipe on it or not?
No, the flour, this flour actually has a recipe for a pizza crust. So this one, yeah, does not. But I am sending you with the recipe for the, so the water turns a little reddish here. And I can tell when this is done because the little white tails come out of the grain. And I took it off too soon. It's not done. Oh, not quite. No, we need a little more. But I would not worry. That's what's so nice about it. Put it right back on and cook it again. So my fingers are now a little wet, so that's nice.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, the method that you just cooked the quinoa, was that's not the 1 cup to 2 cups of water? Or
No,
is it?
this is the one where we're boiling it like pasta.
Okay.
And really what you should be doing, keeping an eye on it. Do you know what I mean by those little white tails that come out?
Well, I've never cooked it.
It's a little, okay, so I'm going to show you what that looks like because I know it's hard to translate here on screen with what I have in the pot, at least until it's done. There is a little seed stem that comes out of the quinoa and it wraps itself around the grain. It's white.
Okay.
And it's very distinctive. And when that's out, you know that it's done. So as soon as I cook these cookies, I'm going to show you a picture of what that looks like.
How do you store your quinoa?
I store mine, honestly, I store mine in the freezer. Unless I just have a small bag of it and I'm going to use it up. If I have a big bag, which is what I tend to buy, I put it in the freezer and then just use what I need.
Same thing with the flour?
The quinoa flour, yes, I would do that as well. I do that with any of my nut flours. If I have coconut flour, almond flour, even any kind of a whole grain flour. I just think it keeps better. The only thing I don't really refrigerate or keep in the freezer is all-purpose white flour. So that doesn't have anything in it to get bad.
I didn't know that. I always have mine on the shelf.
Which one?
I said all my flowers, I keep them in just on the shelf, you know, in the packages they came in.
Okay.
I didn't know you were supposed to put them in the refrigerator or freezer.
It's not, if you use them up in a reasonable period of time, they're going to be okay. I don't do a lot of baking. I like to keep mine in the freezer for that reason because I buy a large quantity at a time, so I have it. I buy more bulk, and then I don't necessarily use it fast. So something could last me quite some time, but I do.
Do you have to unfreeze it or does it come apart?
Yeah, it comes apart. It's just cold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't feel frozen. And there are oils in whole grain. Like I never knew that I never was a fan of whole wheat flour. Well, and then I found out some years after I was buying it that whole wheat flour shouldn't smell the way my whole wheat flour was smelling. And I was buying it at the grocery store and it would already be rancid. You never really quite know if that's sitting on the shelf, how it's been handled. And so it would get rancid very fast. And then that was not a good taste. It's a definite off flavor. So I just started, it's the same thing with nuts. They have those oils in them. And so they get rancid if they're not kept in colder temperatures. You know how nuts get, even the snack nuts that you get, if you have them in your cupboard and you have them for a while and you open them up and they smell a little funny and you don't want to eat them. That's those oils going rancid. Okay, so I'm going to, anybody use Alexa in the kitchen? Anybody have an Alexa? So we teach classes on Alexa. And Alice, do you use your Alexa in the kitchen?
I don't have Alexa.
Oh, I thought you said yes.
No, I was saying no.
Yeah, so we have classes on Alexa so you can find out what Alexa can do for you. She has become a trusted companion. We fight sometimes, but I like her in the kitchen because I can say, Alexa, set the timer for 10 minutes. And she says 10 minutes starting now. So she'll let me know when that 10 minutes is up. She's also really good at helping me convert recipes. So, or convert information. If I want to know what, how many ounces is in 2/3 of a cup? Alexa, how many ounces is in 2/3 of a cup?
0.6667 cups is 5.3333 ounces.
5.33333 ounces. If you couldn't hear her, I don't have her up too loudly. Sometimes she's loud. Could you hear her? No. Okay. So I would have to turn her up a little bit.
She sounded muffled, but I heard her.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can ask Alexa anything and she'll give a shot. She doesn't always come back with the right information, but she's pretty helpful.
This is Alice again. I have a question. I was watching Joanne Weir one time. Have you heard of her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. She was doing quinoa, and I'm thinking for the broth, I can't remember, but I know she put peeled orange peel in the water, and I can't remember what else. And it just looked so delicious. And then she ended with golden raisins. She put that and fluffed it up, and it really looked. That's what made me interested. But I've never seen the recipe again. Couldn't find it.
A citrusy, sweeter quinoa. Yeah, there are so many ways. And you can use quinoa when you talk about trying to incorporate it as a protein source. You can add it to soups. You can sprinkle it on salads, just eat it in a salad. There's just many ways that you can add it. And as you're saying, Alice, you can do it with many different kinds of flavors. So whether you can use a chicken broth, you can cook it with some aromatics like orange peel, and get those fragrances in the grain, just like you do with different grains like rice, and really create a lot of. Yes, I would think that citrus and cranberries and nuts could be really very good in a quinoa salad. So we'll keep our eyes open for some other recipes. Let me go back to. Let me check my time here. I'm getting a little low on time. We might just get those cookies out. I'm not sure. But let me go back to quinoa burgers here, because how many of you like to eat veggie burgers? Okay. So I have two different kinds of quinoa burgers here. One is a recipe that I made, and the other one is a recipe that I have not yet made, but I think will be very good. Now I made the one, let me see if it's this one. I made this one, and I made this one because it only had quinoa in as a base. So I wanted to see how it would taste, much like what I said I'm doing here with the cookies. I wanted to see how it was all by itself. And it was actually very good. It could also stand with stand to have more flavorings in it. So I put this out to the last class that came. I said, take this recipe as a good basic recipe and then doctor it up. Use it to experiment a little bit. And let me get down here to the recipe itself. This calls for a cup of cooked quinoa, some mozzarella shredded cheese, some sun-dried tomatoes. When I made the recipe, I thought it could really use a lot more sun-dried tomatoes. It could also use a cheese that had more flavor to it, perhaps. And then it had a tablespoon of chopped scallion or green onions. I thought it could use more of that. Salt, pepper, garlic powder. And you're cooking the quinoa in vegetable broth. This is primarily because this is the vegetarian dish. If you wanted to, you could use chicken broth, of course. I'm going to take a moment just to check my quinoa. See if my little white curly cues are coming out yet. Yep, they'll be there in a minute. So yeah, here this is the 1 cup quinoa to 2 cups of broth, so that 1-to-2 ratio. And you can easily make it a vegan dish as well by using this cheese substitute and a flax egg. Is anybody vegetarian, vegan here?
Not yet.
So Karen, have you made flax eggs?
No, I've just got the recipe, but I haven't actually used it.
Okay, so a flax egg is just flaxseed, ground flaxseed with water, and it gets viscous like an egg, and you can use it as a replacement for an egg if you want. So otherwise you're using an egg and a half, and that's can be a little hard. So I made mine with 2 eggs. It was okay. I'd try for the egg and a half next time, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker to use 2 eggs. So you mix all those things together and just make a patty with them.
So it's the flax that holds the stuff together?
The flax acts like the egg. That's if you make the vegan version. If you
Right.
use the regular, you just use regular eggs. And then there's this Quinoa burger that I think will be really good. I think this one would have a lot of flavor. This one has Mediterranean, or has sun-dried tomatoes in as well. Notice these are not ones in olive oil, and these are chopped 1/3 of a cup as opposed to a couple tablespoons, so a little bit more. And we're using chickpeas here. So you're getting a flavor combination here with the quinoa and the peas. That's why, and also rolled oats. That's why I offered you the one that just had the quinoa only, because I wanted you to be able to see if you like the flavor of the quinoa by itself. So this has a whole lot of flavors. It's got all those Mediterranean herbs, oregano and garlic. And then we're using an egg again and putting feta cheese, which I think would be delicious in here. You would put it in the burger as well as as a topping. A little parsley, a little oregano, and then there's a tomato olive topping that you can make for these burgers that has cherry tomatoes and the Kalamata olives, parsley, basil, some lemon juice, all mixed together and topped onto the burger. And so that is just a burger that you can pan fry. After you mix it all together, you use your food processor to mix everything. Okay, after you soak your sun-dried tomatoes and then add the other ingredients into your food processor, add the egg, and then put it in a big mixing bowl and fold in everything else, the sun-dried tomatoes, the feta, the parsley, the basil, and then form it into patties. So then you're just going to drizzle the skillet. You can't see this, can you? There. Now, can you see the instructions? My apologies. It's just remembering to go back and forth can sometimes be an issue. Susie, you have your hand up yet. Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry, that was from earlier.
Okay, all right. So you're going to cook the quinoa burgers in a large skillet over medium. So have some oil in the pan, cook them about 4 minutes on each side. Okay, so those are the burgers. Now let's see how we're doing with our quinoa. And I'm going to skip over here and show you some cooked quinoa, so you know what that looks like. Can you see over here at this picture, these little white tails that come out? Maybe this one will show you better. See the little white bits that are coming out around the seed? Alexa, timer off. It's just hard to translate there, but they do have those tails. So let me see if I can show you even better here with what I have. Oh yes, now you can see it. Now you can see it even better than you can on the
Yes.
You see those white tails that are there? That's when you know it's done.
Oh.
Now, looking like a disaster.
Mm.
They are.
Cute.
Yeah, they're nice. Now they need to cool a little bit. I don't want to turn off the oven, leave the oven door open. I'm going to let them cool a little so I can take them off. But yeah, they stay nice and fat. They don't spread out and get thin and crispy, and they're really pretty tasty.
So in order to have a flax egg, you buy flax powder?
Well, yeah, you can just buy flax seeds and buy flax seeds and grind them in your food processor. If you have
I don't have a food processor.
You say you don't?
Right, I don't.
Or actually a coffee grinder does a better job. Do you have a coffee grinder?
Nope.
Okay, then you can buy it. Just buy flax meal, ground flaxseed, and try to buy it in a section that has it refrigerated. So
flax meal refrigerated. Okay.
You can find it refrigerated. I think that would be best for the reasons that we talked about. When I go to buy mine, I buy it somewhere that has a cold room, so I buy it out of the cold room.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of our session today, and I'm curious to know what your biggest takeaway was from today's class.
It was excellent.
Or what you would try. Well, thank you. Thank you. Is there one thing that stuck out as something that you wouldn't have known, or something that you'd say, wow, yeah, that was good to know?
I didn't know about the flowers being on the outside, so I'll learn that for sure. I don't know if mine are going to be any good now, but I love the cookies. I think I'm going to go try those. And I don't have the quinoa flour, so I'm going to have to go buy some.
Yeah, the grocery outlet is where I saw it, and I saw it there for $5.99 for that bag, and I just thought, well, I'm going to give that a try. And so I'm smelling it. It has very little smell to it. And your flours are fine. If you smell your flour and it just smells a little off, then that tells you right away. But
I'm really bad about stuff like that. My husband's always making me throw out things because if they don't have the green on them, I think I'll eat them. It's weird.
Well, you might just find that, you say, I don't really like how that tastes. And it might not be because you don't like it. It's that the flour isn't good. So that's funny though, Nelda. Your husband's the food police.
Yeah, he is. He's always looking at all my things that are already, expired and throws them away. And I'm kind of like, no, it's still good. It smells good to me.
Well, you're right about some of that stuff, because we don't have to throw everything away that's gotten to its expiration date. Things last a lot longer.
I think so too. And I also like this quinoa flour. I know somebody mentioned it about being a pizza crust also. So,
yes.
So now that's an idea for that earlier one when I told you I made the frittata, but I was trying to find a crust for it. Maybe that could be good too.
You can try it. I would say this: make those cookies and get to know what quinoa flour by itself tastes like. Mm-hmm. Because that's pretty unadulterated. It's sweetened up. See, it's a definite different taste. And experiment with that and see if you like it. Okay.
Do you know how long a quinoa flour, how long it would take to cook or even bake?
How long it takes? Well, it took those cookies 10 minutes to bake.
Oh, okay.
So they were done pretty quickly. Yeah. What else?
And you can cook it maybe in an air fryer. Yeah, that would be appropriate.
Wow. You got me there. Can anybody speak to that? I still have to catch up on air fryers and all the miracle things they can do.
Well, they say it has a baking mode in it, so I don't see why not.
Yeah, give it a try. Let us know. Come back, Marlene, and tell us. And that lets me just move to this for a second. Try the recipes, and you can send your results. You can send pictures. You can send new recipes to me at this address, debtheguide@getsetup.io. I know Linda sent me her gumbo recipe, so we're going to work on that. We might do that in the fall, Linda, because of the turkey carcass. So we're interested in anything that you really have a passion for, and you might even want to be on with me talking about what you really enjoy and sharing your recipes. So use that email address and let me know. Take pictures. You can also send right now, if you have favorite dishes that your mom made or favorite recipes that your mom made for Mother's Day. Here we're sort of gathering some of that information too. So that,
thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let me let you go. Oh my goodness, it's 6:35. It seems no matter how hard I try, I go over. So thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for all the great questions. And I hope to see you in another one of my classes soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. See ya.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming, Karen. I hope it was a good experience for you.
Oh, Deb, check out the recipe for that salsa. I put the name of that rice vinegar in the chat room.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. I will do that. I have that chat. I'll have a recording of that chat. So that's great. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. You take care. Thank you, Phil.